There's a lot of different ways to create the new issue. The first way is to just click New Issue in the top left corner of the issue list, and that pops up the form. I'll show you a couple other ways here in a moment, but this is your first service issue. We have our open date. It defaults to the timestamp right now, but you could always change the date that the issue is technically considered opened. We can also define the category of the ticket. I could choose a priority, and I could even set a status. So this is a new high priority maintenance task. Statuses, categories, and priorities can be fully customized by you. If I go into Service Manager, I can see that there is List Manager. And you can create your own priority levels, issues, statuses, so whatever is appropriate for your business. My recommendation is you create a lot of those custom categories, and you make sure that whenever you create a service issue, you apply a category and a priority and a status. And the reason I would recommend that is because it helps with filtering. If you leave all of those blank, then you don't have the ability to filter the list on high priority tickets or just tickets that are maintenance. And so I think it's a good practice to do that. Next, we have our assigned to. This is the user account in Rent Manager who is ultimately responsible for resolving this service issue. And so it has defaulted right now to Nikolai Federick. That is maybe our service tech. I can also track hours. So if you track the hours of work for reporting or payment purposes, if you could track it by the hour as work is done, that hours field could be updated. I'm going to leave it blank for now. We also need to put in the name of our service issue. So I'm going to say leaky sink as an example. It keeps dripping. A short description. It's a webinar, right? You get the idea. I can make that description as long-winded as I want, but that's the name of the issue and the initial description. I can also set a due date. So for example, this is a high priority task. Maybe I need this to be resolved by tomorrow. So I'm going to put in a due date of tomorrow. The resolution is when someone finishes the ticket. This is how it was resolved. So when you're creating the ticket for the first time, it's unlikely you'll enter a resolution. You also have user-defined fields. These are fields that you have created to track service issue data that Rent Manager doesn't track by default. So for example, in my database, I have created a field asking, does the tenant have to be present to do this work? And I'm going to say yes. I can't just go into the house and fix the leaky sink. I need to have someone there. Are we checking all the outlets? No. I don't have to fill out all of those fields necessarily, but again, that's information that is interesting to me to track. You can create user-defined fields by going to lists and user-defined fields, and you can make them for all kinds of accounts, but issues is where we are today. So if you wanted to create issue-related UDFs, you absolutely can. The next item here that is really important are the links. A lot of people skip links. This, again, goes in my list of sort of best practices, things I think we should always be doing. The links, fundamentally, these are the accounts that are involved in this service issue. So let's say that hypothetically, this was 1127 Blackwell is the property that has the leaky sink. So I selected properties in 1127 Blackwell and I said add the link. Furthermore, there is a specific unit. 1127 Blackwell is a single family home. And so I'm going to add that link as well. So that's the unit in that property. And finally, I can also link it if I wanted to a customer. And I'm going to say that Jane Brandekamp is I know she is the customer of that property. She's the one who called in with a service issue. And so in my example, I'm linking all three of those, okay? And there's several reasons why I would recommend doing that, and I'll show you a few of them here in a moment. But that's all I really need. I'm going to save, and I've created the service issue. Rent Manager creates a new ticket ID. Again, I did not change the open date, so it just was for today's date, and I have set my due date. Notice that when back on my issue list, when I go to my opened today issue list, Leaky Sink shows up because that's a service issue that I created today. So what are some of the advantages of creating those links on a service issue? Well, the first one is any account that had the link on it is now going to show on their history notes. So, for example, if I go to Jane Brandekamp and go into her history notes, well, I have a lot of featured history notes in here, but you can see that on 4/24, we have a leaky sink. So a history note has been added on her account. Furthermore, I can even double-click the A attachment to bring up that service issue, so the data is linked. There has been a history note added to the unit and a history note that's been added to the property. And I think that's a great thing to do because it's going to help with reporting. It'll allow you to go to the history notes of a unit and see all of the service issues related to that unit over a stretch of time. It's just a great auditing tool. There are some other advantages to linking, and I will sort of explain some of those as we move along. Now, so I created this service issue. The next step would be I could, if I wanted to hand this issue off either to Nikolai or maybe to a vendor, I could print the service issue. I can click print here in the bottom right corner, and Rent Manager creates a service order. And it pulls the property information. It's pulling in, I don't have the vendor info right now, so it left those blank. But it has the issue and the description. If the person goes in and writes a resolution, I would then at some point type that into the resolution field in Rent Manager. But I also have room now for a signature, a technician's signature, and a date. So that's something that I can print off. Now, that leaky sink, we filled out the general tab. There are others. We're going to talk about parts and labor here in a minute, and that's actually where I can really set up costs for things. But the other thing that you can do is you can actually track history notes on a service issue. And so right now it's blank, but if I wanted to say, went to unit, customer was not home, and save, I can track that as well. So in the same way that we can track history notes on customers and units and properties, you can do it on a service issue as well. The other thing that you can do is you can click on ticket history. This is really kind of an interesting tab in Rent Manager. This is showing you all of the other service issues like it that are in Rent Manager. And Rent Manager determines if two issues are similar based on the links that you define. So for example, this is leaky sink. This is issue 51, but there is also issue 3. There's another leaky sink issue, a separate one in Rent Manager, and it's linked specifically to Jane Brandekamp. So by using those item links, Rent Manager is able to go, oh, okay, well, there's a similarity here. So it helps you look for trends. Notice there's a service issue in here for an asset, for maintenance. It shows up because it's linked to 1127 Blackwell, the unit that has that asset. So the more item links that you create, the more populated the ticket history will be, and it will allow you to see the different trends going on there. Another way for you to create a service issue is to actually go to the unit or the customer in question. So for example, let's say there are some pipes that are having problems at a certain rental unit. So I pulled up my rental unit form. Maybe I could find one here that's vacant. All right, so here's an example, right? Not every unit that has an issue has a customer, right? In this case, maybe we found out lot 10, there's some pipe issues. So with that service issue selected, I can say new service issue, and it opens up the new issue form, but it has already linked that unit to the issue. So really, when I create service issues, I like to create it either from the customer form or the unit, because it already creates one of those item links for you. But in my opinion, you can't have too many item links. The more anything that's involved in the service issue, I think it's worth putting in there because you get more out of it. One of the things that we have decided is that, okay, maybe we had some history notes added. The sink needs to be just completely replaced. So what does that mean? There's probably some labor cost. It probably means that we have to buy a new sink. So what's the cost of just, that item? The parts and labor tab is where we can go to actually add those kinds of things to this service issue. So right here in the grid, I could say, all right, well, I'm setting up parts and labor, so this is going to be for 1127 Blackwell. Who's the vendor that is going to do this work? And maybe I have a general contractor named John Batson, so that's going to be my person. One of the things that I want you to keep in mind here is a lot of times people say, look, I have a lot of vendors, and it's hard to find them in this list. I mean, I could type in the name, I suppose, but it's a little difficult. If you press F3 on your keyboard, it opens Quick Search, and that allows me to very quickly perform searches or even advanced searches to find the vendor in question. You can do that in a lot of fields. So anywhere you can see a magnifying glass, you can use Quick Search. But sometimes, even if you don't see a magnifying glass, if you press F3, the Quick Search might very well pop up. Now, so John Batson's the vendor that's going to do this work. The next, we have to decide on the item. Now, here is a pre-generated list of items in inventory that I have already created. Now, from a service issue, you can actually press View Items here in the bottom right corner, and that will pop up where I can actually create new items, link them to certain charge types and expense accounts. Again, for the purposes of this webinar, we don't have time to really delve into those things. This is to expose you to some of the streamlining features. Let's say that, hypothetically, we have a service issue that happens every month. So, maybe landscapers, right? Every month I pay this vendor to go out and mow the lawn at one of my properties. Instead of manually typing out that service issue every single month, I can create what's called a recurring service issue. I go to Service Manager, Recurring Issue List. I don't have any right now, so it's a blank list. But what I'm going to do is create basically a service issue template. If I click New, it kind of looks like a service issue, but notice it's saying, what's the first time that you want me to post this? Oh, you want me to post it on the 24th? How many times should I post this? So maybe my agreement is I'm going to pay this vendor 6 times, and then I'm going to see what the lawn looks like at the end of that period and decide whether I'm going to renew or not. Choose how often it posts. Is it once a month? Maybe I'm actually paying this person every 2 weeks. So this service issue happens on a recurring basis. I can set a due date. I'll say it's immediately due. Set categories. It's property wide. It's new. I won't assign it to a user, but it is Alpha Lawn Care. Priority low. Issue bi-weekly lawn mowing. The property is Buckeye Hall, so I'll create that. So it's just linked to that property. And maybe here, again, in the parts and labor,